Not at all? Okay. So
the question is, who has the louder voice, and should we switch off?
hello? Does that amplify?
No?
I hear you, but it's not coming through you.
Yeah?
The switch is on, yes. Yes. Yep, cool. That's right. Oh, no, the display turns on.
It's fancy, fancy, schmancy.
It turns off. So I think it's still recording, but I should maybe shout out more.
I think it's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll figure it out. If not, we can translate after with closed captioning, saying this is what we said, and it was absolutely brilliant.
I will make the effort to be 3 times louder than I normally am.
And I will try and be softer because I'm normally really, really loud.
By the way, there are microphones here.
Oh, perfect. So I will stand right
This is a super
here
connected room.
so everyone
so that's
can hear
perfect.
me. All right, so we're going to try and make this tailored to what people want and what is helpful for people, because there's nothing more boring, at least for me, than us standing in front of you and lecturing you on things that you have no interest in. So I think Jessica was going to get started, and we're going to introduce ourselves and sort of tell you how we got here, and then we're going to ask you questions and go from there.
And for all of you that are in here, feel free to move up. But we see you, so it's okay. But it is going to be more of a intimate conversation. So just a quick self-introduction. My name is Jessica Park. I'm the Chief Information Officer and Associate Dean of School of Law for Abraham Lincoln University. Part of why I'm here is to talk about implementing technology projects at our school. We are a fully online school registered with the State Bar of California. Another part of my experience that I bring to the table is I do work with a distance education accreditor on standards for distance education. So that is the Distance Education Accrediting Commission in Washington, D.C., and I'm a part of the Standards Committee. And especially in the recent just expansion of distance learning, obviously even accreditors at the national level are relooking at their standards and evolving. So if any of you have questions about that, I am very happy to speak towards that. And with that, I want Jenna as well to introduce.
And hi, everyone. I'm Jenna Martin. I am, until June 30th, not that I'm counting or anything, I am the Associate Dean for Innovation and Global Development at West Virginia University. On July 1st, I get to go back to being a full-time faculty member, but with a lot of the innovation part still tied in. And so I was specifically, this position was created for me. It will go into the ether when I step down, and it was done specifically so that we could start 2 LLM programs, or I should say more accurately, bring 2 LLM programs online. Before that, the reason why I got tasked with this is because I taught online courses for our College of Business and Economics since I think 2010, and then I developed one of our first law school courses online, and it was a skills course. It's Business Drafting Transaction, which I'm actually teaching as we speak. You can believe it. So I have done a lot on, there was a speaker actually yesterday, Jason Fisk, who talked a lot about curriculum design, teaching the classes, and administrative. I've done all 3, and so I can speak to that. Sort of in trying to create a program basically out of whole cloth. That was my fun assignment.
And I just want to share what Jenna and I share in common is that we've been at the ground level in terms of curriculum design, often teacher orientation, and administrative policy setting at our institution. So we were kind of thinking what would distinguish us in terms of what we can share with you or what questions you can ask. It's the fact that we do share that joint departmental experience at all levels to implement an educational project that's online. So with that, we had goals for this session, and you're going to help us with those goals. We wanted you to engage, but this is what we're really ready here to deliver in terms of perspectives on critical steps, either with implementing online programs from wholesale cloth, as she was saying, or just adding components to an online program already, which is more of what I can speak to. And also focus on key questions that will be relevant to challenges that you face with the idea or the implementation of online learning at your institutions. So this next portion, it's really important for you to depend on your caffeine or whatever other beverage you are to stay alert, and just help us kind of tailor towards you as well. And I really mean it. Jenna and I are very willing to sort of flex between ourselves to what's of more interest to this room, and it can be quite individualized. So first of all, how many of you are currently exploring online learning at your institutions? Okay, great. Okay. If yes, I'm going to just go through different stages because I think it's helpful for not only for us, but you can look around as well. How many of you would describe yourself as being really in that preliminary research point? Okay, good. Great. We have some resources definitely in this presentation that you can take a look at that can be shared research with your team as you're doing your proposal.
If you are lucky enough to have a team.
Like as well.
Talk about that too.
We're part of your team. That's why you're here. So secondly, how many of you are building out an online program or a component that you're adding on?
So you've already gotten institutional buy-in, but now you're sort of at that next stage.
Okay, great. And then lastly, implementation is kind of a broad word, but how many is they're put in charge of implementing? There's already been built out. Okay, great. So that helps us.
The spectrum.
Yes, absolutely. For those of you who are looking for more preliminary research, there's great sessions here. There's also, I'm going to talk about it at the end, a lot of research out there on online learning. And as far as the overlap between legal education and online learning, I will be referring you to some resources. But CALI has a great working group here. They're going to be meeting in this room at lunch. So please stay for that if you are looking for that research. And the last thing, and this is something where we will, sort of restate, if you had to call out, what's a major challenge, such at this point, you don't have to go into great detail because we're all still getting to know each other. But are there certain words that, for you, come to mind as you're thinking, what's your major challenge at this point, whatever stage you're at? And
Buy-in. Funny, if nobody had said anything, I was going to say, you might want to think about that.
Buy-in in general, yes.
I'm going to keep a record.
Absolutely.
So we make sure to talk about it.
And that's a great topic because that can go into, the research or, the context that you give them or the training, right, the training and implementation. Any other shout-out or words? Just
Money.
Money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Resource management, talking to your finances.
You're bringing up all our highlights.
Oh, okay.
Tech support also.
Tech support. And I saw a hand over here. I did. Okay. Great. Go ahead.
Assessment, but assessing the class.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The person,
Absolutely.
not the student.
Absolutely. So course review, curriculum review, and how is it working in terms of outcomes assessment? No, that's great. Thank you for writing that. So I think those are some great words for this group already. And actually, there's one more here, and we'll go ahead and take that.
Control, organizational structure.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably control and monitoring.
Sorry, I'm
Probably
literally
goes into
reliving
that.
the last 2 years of my professional life with all of this, so.
Her memories are coming.
Oh,
Yeah.
they are.
So I think this is a great, batch of words. I think it really maps on to what are the words that come to most people's mind when they are thinking of implementing the technology for an online project. So we will tailor to these. And so we have some core questions that Jen and I were going to share between us. And knowing where you all are in your stages and sort of the words that come up to mind for you as your major challenge. We're going to tailor towards that.
Right. And
So,
can we also say we really do want this to be a conversation? So if, as we're talking, you guys want to jump in, provide additional feedback, depending on where your stage is, or have additional questions, like, we really would like it to be interactive.
you can tell us to talk louder as well, because I forget that. I'm very quiet usually.
I don't think I'll have that.
The one last thing I did want to add, because it does come up here, are people especially interested in talking about what to add to a Juris Doctor program or adding an online LLM? Because that is another distinguishing thing. So how many of you are here about online LLMs? Okay. Okay, too. And then the rest of you are here because you're thinking of adding online programming to a Juris Doctor program.
And actually, there's a third category of people who want to do like non-JD masters within the concept of your law school. Okay, yeah.
Ah, okay, great. Thank you. So, okay, that helps us greatly as well, right? So,
Yeah.
Okay. And with that, we are going to get started on the questions. So, Jenna, how did your institution get started in distance learning? How was that process?
So there's two parts to sort of, and this goes a little bit to my background again. The reason why I was tasked with this was because I was the person in the building who, probably through my own daggone fault, was the person with the most experience in online learning. The College of Business and Economics had reached out to me, because those are my core courses. I teach business and human rights, which is actually a thing, but most people don't know that. But I teach primarily business to our students. And so the College of B&E reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in teaching a business course over there. And at the time, they had an evening program that they rapidly switched over to an online course. And so I was at ground zero in trying to help them develop this course for an online environment. I then thought, because quite frankly I needed the money, that would be a really great way to have a summer course using that model for the law school, and dealt with my associate dean at the time, who was a wonderful person and a self-described Luddite. He was like, "You want to do what for what?" But my dean at the time, who's now our provost, was actually quite in favor of it, so she gave me sort of approval to do it. And from then I just kept teaching and all of that. We have two LLM programs at West Virginia University, one in forensic justice, which is literally the only one in the country, and then one on energy and environmental sustainability, which is one of several in the country. And part of what we got when we originally started to do the programs is they were all going to be face-to-face. And the feedback we got from students at the time was, this would be great, I have to work. So I cannot devote time to doing a full-time LLM program. And so that's when I got involved, and they said, okay, how do you task this? How do we turn this into something that students can do? So I learned, my original mandate, and we can sort of talk about this because it relates to organizational control, my original mandate was supposed to be to bring the face-to-face courses online. That was literally all that was in my core group. It became pretty clear, not soon enough, but eventually, that was not enough of a mandate, that I actually needed to be it. And so I went to my dean and I said, there are two things that I want. I don't want to be an administrator anymore because I really want my summers back. But I recognize that you need someone who is going to be it. So I am willing to be it. And my dean, who is a wonderful man, was like, yep, sold. And I was like, darn, I should have negotiated better. But yeah, so I then became the it person for every part of the online LLM programs. To the extent that we still have a face-to-face program, which I don't know how long that will last, the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs is pretty much the person that handles that. But if it touches the online LLM at all, I am it. And that was sort of very deliberately done. And both of those projects started last year is when we sort of started actually developing the courses. The forensic justice LLM went live last year. The energy and sustainability, we actually didn't get enough students, so that hasn't gone live yet. But we have the courses at the ready if they should decide to do that. So it was a learning experience. We started off with 3 students. We've learned a lot from those 3 students. They have been very good about giving us feedback in whatever way that they have.
And then just to follow up and tie it into some of the words.
Sure.
Buy-in, or can you speak a little bit to
Yeah.
the buy-in?
So, like I said, when I first started thinking about online courses, the person who is in charge of developing the online masters, the online MBA at B&E, is actually a really good friend of mine. And I literally just took her out and said, you need to tell me everything that I need to learn about how to do it. Which would be one of my big tips. If you know anyone, and I will volunteer as someone, I usually work for sushi, but I can be persuaded for other means. If you know anyone who has gone through this before, I would highly recommend finding some way to basically ask them to brain dump all knowledge into your head. And the one thing that she said when I sort of talked to her about this is, you need faculty buy-in. She's like, if this is going to work, you need to have that buy-in, because you will find a whole spectrum of faculty members, everyone from like, yeah, that's great, I want to do it, to, what, are you nuts? This is not how legal education is. And the thing I love about our university is or my law school in particular, the professors care passionately about teaching the students. But for a lot of people, that manifests itself in very different ways, right? So people who originally heard about online education, they thought, oh, this is going to be the University of Phoenix all over again, right? For others, they're like, no, this could be a really good way. And the way that I pitched it to faculty is, this will give you access to education. There are students out there who would love to be able to do this, but they cannot access in Wheeling, West Virginia, or in Pocahontas County, West Virginia. They can't get here. They can't take that time off from being a lawyer to do it. And so that was sort of one of the key talking points that I used to tell our faculty, like, no, this is why this is beneficial. The other thing that I did is I made sure to communicate to our faculty every step of the way. So at the beginning I said, hey, I stepped into this role. This is what I'm going to do. If you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, give it to me. Then I was like, okay, now we're here. I would love people, if there are people who are interested in doing this, please come and step forward and do it. Then I went around basically to now our faculty is not huge. We have probably 35 full-time faculty, but I went to every single faculty member and I said, tell me where you are with this. Tell me your concerns. Tell me where you're at. And that was a direct result of that conversation I had with my friend at B&E, who said, this is how you get faculty buy-in. This is how you do it. You talk to them one-on-one. You figure out what their concerns are, and if you can address it. If not, then you explain why, sort of on balance, the benefit is there.
Okay, great. So just in terms of this addressing this question for ALU, so basically ALU started in 1996, and it's a pretty unique story, but we came to the field just almost solely focused around the working adult learner and thinking about options with the technology at the time to deliver education. And so our story might be a bit unique, but that was the mission and that was the vision. And so from the beginning, we really built up from a team of stakeholders that believed in that mission. In terms of what I can speak to in terms of getting started, ALU really evolved with even the correspondence model, even through mail. And there are definitely a body of schools in California that have started that model, and they do it for the working adult learner. We have evolved, obviously, towards the online and internet technologies, and there are so many things that have come out, even if you look at the last 5 years, in terms of learning management systems, student information systems. So for us, we're constantly researching, and even though we are this team that already believe in the mission, you still have to keep up in terms of change management, market research, and we continue to do so. So I'm going to be speaking towards some of the latest things that we have researched in the field. And just to explain as well, we're a fully online law school, but we permit students to see our broadcasts live and on site in classrooms in Los Angeles. And so we're kind of a unique model. you can call us a hybrid in the sense that we have that on-site availability to students, an on-site administrative office. But we ultimately broadcast everything live and online. There's nothing on-site that's not broadcasted, recorded, and reserved in our archives for students. And the other thing I wanted to say as well is all homework submission, all quiz taking happens online. So we go through technology orientation with all our students and faculty to manage that software. So with that, that's where we have evolved to since from getting started. It's a bit of a different story because our stakeholders and investors were interested from that in the beginning. But still, a lot of persuasion has to occur, especially if you're shifting system to system with online data. That's very important to archive for compliance purposes. So.
Well, and the one thing that I will say that is particular to both either the LLM program or if you're starting sort of, because the other thing that we are thinking of starting or housing in the law school now is we have a Master's of Legal Studies. Because the ABA originally didn't like those kinds of programs being housed in the ABA, we have one at the university, but it wasn't housed with us. And now there's thoughts of sort of collaborating or being more collaborative with the college that does handle that. But the sort of constant pushback, the other constant pushback that we heard from faculty members was as long as it does not interfere with our JDs, right? So what they particularly didn't want, especially in this age of lower law school enrollment, which of course nobody has ever felt at all, is we have much smaller classes which get sort of canceled because of low enrollment, and the concern was if students are taking JD classes online, then that's going to cannibalize these face-to-face classes even further, right? So the sort of what they did not want to happen was JD students to be able to take in the fall or spring semesters online courses that were in essence competing with the face-to-face JD classes. And it's funny, it's one of those things with fact that you have to dig a little bit, you know, to sort of figure out what their real concerns are. And once we got there and figured out that that was an issue, we said, no, the idea behind the LLMs is this is for LLM students. And they're like, oh, okay, as long as you have someone that doesn't interfere with my teaching, then that's fine. It's become a little bit of an interesting thing because a lot of our LLM classes are available in the summer as well. And for those classes, because they are summer classes, they are open to JD students. But because most faculty don't teach in the summer, they're fine with that, right? So being very clear about what the parameters are, if you're offering this, I think is really helpful. About A, in terms of what you will allow students to do, and B, what you want faculty to do, right? So that's faculty buy-in on both ways. And then there's also the particular issue of the ABA, right, which is you can't offer more than a certain amount of online courses in the JD curriculum anyway without running afoul of ABA rules, unless you get a variance like Mitchell Hamlin did. But yeah, no, I mean, it's sort of thinking about all of those different ways of getting buy-in.
And with that, I'm going to shift to our second question, which we kind of got started a little bit on. But what were the critical steps for building out online programs or implementing the online learning components involved in those programs? So obviously, the faculty buy-in and everything, we're already segueing away because that is a very critical step. But Jenna, what are some other steps for build-out that were important that you learned?
So the biggest thing for me, and part of this I will tell you, a lot of it I learned because I'd done that. A lot of it I learned in the absence of doing it. Like, oh, that would have been a really good thing if I had done that before. So critical step number one, getting faculty buy-in. Critical step number two was trying to hold faculty accountable when you did get them to do things, right? And this sort of ties into the resource issue. So again, one of the plus sizes of the fact that there is lower enrollment is that right now our faculty to student ratio is ridiculously small. And so we have a lot of faculty teaching, quite honestly, courses that they don't need to teach right now because they only have 1 or 2 students in. And so what we did for a lot of faculty members is we offered them a course release, right? So that instead of teaching your face-to-face class for the semester, why don't you instead use this time to develop an online course in this or that? And then we put together, I won't call it a contract because it's our tenure track faculty, but we put together basically a memorandum of understanding of what they would need to do this, right? So part of it at the university level, WVU is part of the Quality Matters accreditation body, which provides sort of accreditation standards for online learning. So every class that is offered online at the university, whether it's a law class or not, has to follow these models. And people take issue with it. I actually think it's a pretty good model. So part of what we had them do is they had to basically enroll in this course where they learned about the Quality Matters model. They learned a little bit about sort of how online learning translates. The second thing that they had to do is they had to work. So at the university, because we have so many of our courses online, we actually have a whole department that is dedicated to helping faculty members bring their courses online. So I will tell you, I don't know if Jessica's story is different. We didn't work with outside vendors. There's talks still now about going to outside vendors, but we worked with they call them the iDesign team, right? So a group of instructional designers who help you take your information and put it into an online course format. Because the course was so, because iDesign is sort of in the middle of doing this for every unit at the university, there's a huge backlog. So we had to develop a timeline to make sure that we got all of these classes live in time to do it. So that was my job, right? Making sure that we had the map of, okay, if this class is going live in the fall, this is when we start working with iDesign. iDesign makes them sign their own MOU that says you're going to have these modules up by this amount of time. And then if you don't do this, you don't get your course release, or there's some sort of penalty. But if you want this course release, this is how you do it. There were some, however, so for instance, for those of you who know Marjorie teaches in our online program. And Marjorie is also a clinic professor, which means Marjorie does not get course releases because there is no course releases for our clinics. And in those situations when we had that, we would offer them sort of limited pay to design the course, which was different from the pay that we would offer them to teach the course if it wasn't an overload situation. And again, it was the same kind of thing. You had to do all the work. You had to comply with all of these sort of things that we put in the MOU. And if you do that, then you will get paid. So that's sort of how we handled it. But because resources were so limited, we used overloads a lot, or course releases, I should say, a lot. And we had sort of a specific MOU that we used. And by the way, if anyone who's trying to start this, I'm happy to share whatever we use. So if you always just email me, I didn't put my email up, but it's jennamartin@mail.wvu.edu. I'm happy to share whatever I use because Lord knows people shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel.
And I've seen a little bit of that document, and it's quite impressive. So that is something that if you do want to see the more granular details, that she can be contacted for. In terms of critical steps for building out the program, for ALU, the fully online program was already there when I came to the institution in 2010. But in terms of maintaining that program, and this will be obvious to this whole group here, you definitely research what entities to register the program with. For us, it was really the California State Bar registration that we maintain, and also the Distance Education Accrediting Commission, which is our national accreditor. Both of those bodies have different parameters for conducting distance education. So a lot of what you do is you apply the stricter standard, which we do in our program. And in addition, with the Department of Education as well, they have different standards for online instruction, how it can be conducted, how it can be monitored. So ALU always researched what can we do in systems to make sure we're in compliance, and obviously trained our team to make sure to be checking and monitoring student progress as is required. In the last session before this, they mentioned, it may have been you, mentioned state authorization as well. There was someone who mentioned state authorization. That is also something that is a real factor that you want to consider for any online program. And that is something, wearing many hats, that I did orchestrate at my school. So if you have questions about, let me know. In terms of specific components to the program, so my story is really, I already had a fully online program there for me to join and maintain when I came to the staff. My main projects had to do with transitioning the school from proprietary technology systems to other systems that offered more ways to track students' progress. There's so many things available now in terms of systems that will, auto-notify you through email if a student submits an assignment in. And also exploring a synchronous live engagement system that could be used not only for class, lectures, workshops, but even to the point that we run an online mock trial regularly for our fourth-year students. And we have litigators work with our students on their trial techniques from voir dire to closing statement, and to make that available so that an online student can join was a project implemented in my time at the school. So always, I would say the critical steps are first doing the research in terms of compliance and making sure you never hit anything with compliance. Any brilliant idea is only as brilliant as it doesn't cause side issues that take up your time later. So that always came first, and then it became a question of discussing with faculty and staff teams, hey, there's this idea, it is benchmarked with the type of engagement that we're seeing in the online space that could be beneficial to the law students. How can we get it implemented? What is the change to staff time? All of those things. For ALU, we have a regular staff team in our administrative office most of the week. So sometimes it's just adjusting their schedules and such. But if it is something much more expansive, we have to explore that, and that can either defer the idea or cause us to change it. Lastly, I think the critical step, and I'm just going to say this having had to build these out, is that anytime there's a change to system, logically there's going to be pushback if people do not trust that you're going to give them the training materials they need to succeed. And especially if you have a team of stakeholders that really care about your mission, really care about the student, there's no way to get them angry quickly if you don't plan out in advance what their training is going to be like. And as has been said in this room in the last session, you have faculty that may have only done PowerPoint, right, up to the point that they're asked to transition. So we take care to build out all those materials with our tech team. We have screenshots, we have whatever we need, we have videos, and we have a center online at our school for faculty and we make sure they go through that before they're live in class and not wanting to embarrass themselves. So, that's very crucial, and I would say that's a critical step.
Well, and can I echo that?
Yeah.
Because so the funny thing is that was one of the critical steps I should have taken and I didn't. And I'll just be very honest. We made them go through all the training in terms of designing courses and how to think about it. And then I just kind of assumed that they had a baseline knowledge of our learning management system, right? So we use Blackboard, and Blackboard's been available forever on our site. That's what they use. But most of the professors use Twin, just for because they teach face-to-face, and Twin is what they know. And so it didn't occur to me, and this is completely my fault because I've been using it for a while, that even though they've gone through the process of designing this course for Blackboard, that they might not know how to administer the course in Blackboard. And so I got a whole bunch of professors going, so how do I do this? And how do I grade? And how do I do this? Because law schools tend to be worlds unto themselves, right? And they're like, oh, we don't use it that way. We don't do what the rest of the university had. And so if I could do it over again, I would have made as part of this little MOU that they include that they have to learn, they have to get training on the learning management software. Because working with iDesign, basically they give Word documents to the instructional designers, and then the instructional designers put something up and it's all pretty and wonderful. They don't do any of the stuff in eCampus until they're in eCampus, and then it's often too late. And then the other thing, and this is a B&E business term, which I didn't know until I started teaching it, onboarding, right? So this idea of teaching the faculty what the expectations are, right? So again, part of the thing that most professors, some professors are very good at being very responsive to students. Other professors, not so much, right? Just in the face-to-face world that we normally live in. In online learning, that interaction with faculty is critical, right? And so conveying that to faculty that, no, you actually do have to respond to students within 24 hours or 40 hours at the most on the weekends. You do have to check the class this isn't a park it and leave and come back in 12 weeks to grade the final. No, like you have to be engaged. And if I wish I could have known to emphasize that more at the beginning, and I didn't. But I think that is critical, is like making sure professors know at every step of the way what is expected of them.
And I just wanted to take a quick moment because we have been speaking for a while. Were there any questions from the group about ways we address these first two questions on slide? Okay.
I have two questions for you, Jessica.
Okay, great.
First one is we're also a DEAC school.
Oh, great.
And so I was wondering, I know we have a lot of discussions, national, regional, should we switch, should we stay? Wondering if you've had similar discussions. And secondly, I just wanted some clarification. It sounded like your program was unique in that all of your classes are given in LA. You don't use adjuncts or any other faculty for online models. They all have to be at your physical location for students who want to come in.
Yes, so, and can I get your name and your school real quick?
Jeremy Ravinsky, National Paralegal College.
Oh, great. Okay, Jeremy Ravinsky, National Paralegal College. Great questions. I'll address the second one first, just because that one's easy for us. Since we started the school, it became very important to us to have an on-site administrative office location. That helps us. Obviously, technology has evolved, so that's no longer as necessary. But for us, as a small team initially, it was very important to have that kind of contact with each other. So we still have that on-site administrative office. We bring any faculty to that office for orientation. We have on-site classrooms. We set up studios on-site where they broadcast from. We do training onto off-site chat recording as well, and that can be done at a different location. We are going more into off-site lecture capture. But yes, we don't, and for us, because we're registered with the State Bar, it makes sense. We're not looking as much for, attorneys across the U.S. to be teaching our students. We're looking for California attorneys. So that is a unique part of our model.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
But for the courses itself, are the professors required to be in the classroom as well, or is there and being video recorded?
That's our model at this time, and it's because it supports not only the onboarding process. I mean, it may not be what you all decide to do, but for us, that's a core thing that we do. We want to do on-site onboarding as much as possible with faculty before they are on the online. So they can always kind of, and if they are struggling, they can always connect back with our tech support or student services, and we can support them on the gradebook and everything. So we offer a lot of on-site support. In terms of the second question, so Distance Education Accrediting Commission is a national accreditor. I like them very much because they are a boutique accreditor that focuses on distance learning practices. One of the things that I hope it made it onto the last slide here, if I have the proper version, is just even this training center that they have, that they offer out to all institutions or stakeholders interested in distance learning. And I think they're great. I think their standards are sometimes even stricter with the idea of, it's very important in distance learning to have reputation control. And so that is something I'm 100% behind. With that being said, the decisions for marketing or the decisions for, getting buy-in, I do think that national accreditation can be seen a bit differently from regional. I work with DAC staff and other DAC schools always to help educate and help persuade people on that. but it is an ongoing thing. So yes, and an interesting American Bar Association is really a national accreditor, but in a professional field. But a lot of people don't talk about it that way. But yes, so yeah.
Right, and so part of what I had to do is, because we were running an LLM, is I had to get acquiescence from the ABA as well, and so making sure that we built in time for that, because we're not allowed to advertise or do anything for the ABA before we have gotten that acquiescence. And we haven't done it yet for any sort of non-JD masters, but presumably if we're running a non-JD masters, we would have to do the same thing.
And well. Just really quickly, not to put you on the spot, but is anyone curious about to hear about that, the ABA acquiescence process? Okay, so we do have one person.
So it's basically, well, so can I ask, are you a standalone law school, or do you work within a larger university system?
In the university.
Okay, so presumably then you would have to run this through your faculty senate and your grad council. We did that, and then we used the parameters that we had for our grad council as a template for what we gave to the ABA. And honestly, the biggest thing for that, again, was looking at the timeline and making sure you had built in enough time to work backwards, right? So making sure that we had buy-in from the faculty enough to get that up to our grad council, to get that up to the faculty senate, so that we had all of that in place before we sent it to the ABA, because that's one of the questions that the ABA will ask you is, do you have buy-in from the faculty senate, from the provost, from the president? So making sure that you built in enough time. So I had done it, I think we submitted it in February for their April meeting, and I thought, oh, that's plenty of time, surely we can do it, and we cut it really close to making sure that happened. But we got it done, and we got approved. So.
Great. Before we go to the third question, is there any other questions kind of relating to point 1 or 2, or something you wish we covered more? Okay, if not, let's go to the major takeaways from our experience. So
Jessica, no, I'm going to switch it.
Yes.
What are the major takeaways you gleaned from your experience doing this?
So thank you. Basically, for me, the core thing that I do, and I know that can look different at your institutions, but for me it's very important to stress the mission and vision. And I do that from the level of, ground level support, homework graders, all the way up to, your advisory committees and councils. I just always start with the vision and mission. If that's something that we disagree on up front, or it's just not as much of an interest to the working relationship, that's something I always try to address first, because I think that's important. I think that's important for the whole team to come around. And at the end of the day, whether you disagree on the method, or you have your separate concerns on the platforms, and those certainly can be valid, and you work through those. I just always stress what the vision and mission is first, and make sure that it's important to the other person, that they also have that buy-in. Be willing to put research into whatever you value implementing. I filter a lot of great, brilliant ideas every day at my institution about how can we change this, or how can we modify it to be better. So I always ask people, put the research into it, be able to talk to third parties and stakeholders about how it will be effective, and that will speak to your own influence and persuasiveness, right? So I will be giving some resources as well here, but of course the fact that we're here means we're interested in helping with any of you on these questions, and I really mean it. It's conferences like these, especially if you feel like a one-man team at your school, this is part of your team. You should see it as part of your team. It really ends up being how it happens and how things are successful. So please do be willing to reach out to us. I would say the most useful ways that I've gotten research, especially at a smaller school and in more of a niche field, is, use your surveys wisely. Use your advisory groups wisely, even, building from your faculty and students. You would be surprised how much people care about having things work and be of quality and be better. And so even if you're small, which is usually our issue in resources, having that lunch or coordinating that advisory group has always been worthwhile. And obviously, as you have more levels to your institution, you can think about who the influencers are there and try to get them to be in the advising. Lastly, what I would say, and this is something coming more from the compliance end, is that demographics do operate quite differently. If you're getting into a market demographic, research it. I think no one will now underestimate the learning patterns of just each generation that's coming up and what they want from online education. But I find, especially when you are working towards plans for retention and student success and student outcomes, knowing how your students work, how they're getting information, what they get distracted by, that's crucial for any online education project these days, because they can access so many more things online than they used to. So I would just speak to that. And with that, Jenna, what are your major takeaways?
Well, I don't know. That's a great question.
So curious.
So honestly, for us, it probably is a little bit of a unique thing. Do not underestimate the importance of recruiting and retention. So part of the issue that we had is, so we have a new Dean of Online, and I literally think that's his title, is Dean of Online for the whole university. And he was brought in because he knows a lot about online education in general, but he's not a lawyer. And so he came in with a lot of really great ideas that our sort of admissions people were like, yeah, that doesn't work for LLM students, that doesn't work for LLM students, that doesn't work for LLM students. And so a lot of the sort of turnkey analytics that you can use for master's students, you cannot use for JDs. And honestly, I didn't know that until they were sort of talking to me about all of this. And so it's adjusting for that. The other thing that I would say is once you have, so there's the recruitment issue. And honestly, again, we're still struggling with that. Part of it, I think, is because our LLM program, the Forensic Justice one, it's a brand new program, period, right? Like it's nobody has heard of it because it is brand new. So trying to get that sort of brand recognition out there has been a big issue for us. But then once you've recruited them, you have to keep them. and again, this is one of the things that because there was no IT person at the time, those students sort of got lost in the cracks, right? We fixed it, we self-corrected, but for the first few weeks, it was like, okay, who's in charge of these students now, right? Like what happens? They're here, they're in these courses, who is in charge of sort of keeping it on? So one of the things that we are changing for this year, because this is only the first year we've run it, is we are now going to have an online orientation, right? Whereas before we had an in-person orientation, but again, it was sort of like, okay, who's in charge of the in-person orientation? How does that work? We're going to have an online orientation. We are then going to follow it up with a residency, an in-person residency, which is sort of against the new trends now. The new trends are for all of these online programs to just be exclusively online. And again, for art, we're part of our residency, they're going to go to crime scenes. They're going to do ballistic shooting, and we think that's a sort of important component of our program. And so we are reluctant to get rid of it. But we have had to be very clear from the moment we recruit them that this is going to be a part of it, that you will have to come on site to the campus for 2 days in the fall and then 2 days in the spring. And then honestly keeping the number of touches with the students to make sure that they are satisfied, to make sure that they aren't frustrated with the technology, right? Because the number one thing that I've just sort of learned anecdotally is if the students are frustrated with technology, they're going to be so frustrated with the course. It doesn't matter how brilliant the content is, right? They're going to be done. And so sort of working on the back end and making sure that technology. And this actually goes to one of the questions, which was tech support. So we have an OIT, right, an IT office, just like everyone else at the university. But most of the colleges at the university who do this for a living who do this all the time, they have an embedded instructional support person for it. We don't. And it's one of the things that I really wish we did, that we had someone who literally just worked for the law school, who would be there to sort of answer the questions. If a faculty member doesn't know how to do the Grade Center, they can help them. They can sort of be that liaison. But we right now don't have, I'll just be completely honest, we don't have the students to support that yet. And so we've talked about doing things like TAs, student workers, and this is where relationships come in. Honestly, the way that we're getting it done right now is A, making sure it's good on the front end. B, I will sort of nicely cajole the people I work with in instructional design to say, hey, we're struggling with this. Technically, this isn't part of your role, but would you really, really mind doing it because we love you? And then they do, right? And so we've sort of developed these workaround relationships with people. But again, I'll be completely honest, that's not going to work long term. And so eventually we will have to invest in the money to get a tech support person. We don't have the numbers yet to justify that, but I suspect once we get to the sort of 10-person mark, we will. So those were sort of the biggest takeaways, is that we were so focused on building the structure and getting the students in the door that once they got there, we didn't really think about what happened next, right? Like, oh yeah, they're lawyers, they'll be fine. And yeah, that was probably the biggest thing that I didn't learn that I wished I had.
With that, I think we're going to go further into Q&As. Oops, here we go. Oh, I have it all there. And actually, this is the last slide. We're right at the time to do Q&A, so that's good. So what I would mention here is that I did put some additional resources. This is uploaded to the site as well, but there is a working group meeting that's going to be here in the same room. So if you want to stick around for that, I think that's wonderful. I did want to give a shout out. Greg Brandis is in the audience. I want to give a shout out to you. Mm-hmm. He has been part of the production of an ebook, Distance Learning in Legal Education, Design, Delivery, and Recommended Practices. It is a great tome of experience built up from many schools, many stakeholders from the educational perspective. So I encourage you to check that out. The URL was way too long, so just Google, and it will emerge magically for you. So also there are some other bodies as well I wanted to add here. Oop, and the last link didn't make it, but Online Learning Consortium, that is not just for law schools, that's across all of online distance education, but they are a great body that have a lot of training programs for teachers. The Distance Education Accrediting Commission Training Center, that is something that I do some free tutorials on for the DAC standards, but they have a lot of other things too that they've delivered for distance education institutions. And this last broken thing I had was a U.S. Department of Education article. I believe it said evidence-based practices in online learning. It's an article that's, well, it's a publication that is very, very long, but it is something from the U.S. Department of Education that focuses on evidence-based research on how effective is online learning. So I will fix the slides and get that in there, or you can Google, because Google delivers everything now.
Wonderful.
Is there any?
We forgot one thing. Sorry,
Okay.
This is why I write things down, so I do in my class. Peer course review and assessment, someone was asking about that. I probably know less than Jessica does on this, but I will tell you, as part of our accrediting agency for online education, we have sort of the initial, you go in and you learn about the Quality Matters system, which requires student-to-student contact, student-to-instructor contact, student-to-content contact. Then you basically cajole people to be peer advisors. So they are then trained in the Quality Matters sort of alignment accrediting thing, and then they go in and assess the individual courses. And the idea is you have teams of 3. They have a rubric, because rubrics are all the thing now. And there's one person who's the subject matter expert, right? So someone who has an understanding of the underlying issue with business or human rights or whatever. And that team of 3 basically either gives you a pass or a fail grade based on the Quality Matters rubric. It is not required at every university, at every school. But when they do, they usually require you to have taught the class a couple of times just to work out all the kinks first. But it's a really good way to, even if there's no formal QM, to sort of start something like that at your school just with faculty, right? Faculty who are interested in teaching, faculty who have been through the process. Instituting something like that online, I think, is feasible. So I just wanted to mention that.
That's great. And what I wanted to mention for here as well is that the more you can get your curriculum developers to also be part of your curriculum review team, it's really helpful, because sometimes what they learn from seeing the loop closed is great. And we also do a lot of course review. We align it to the standards that we're held to for accreditation and for our registration. So we have a great manual on it that we give to every curriculum developer or any course reviewer. If you are more curious about that, you can definitely contact us. Is there any further questions from the group? Thank you so much for joining us for this meeting. But any questions further?
Because he answered all of your questions, that's it? Or yes,
you did
sir.
such a good job.
I like when you mentioned an orientation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an orientation to law school? Like 1L? I mean, where you're...
No. So this is, again, because this is an LLM group that we are dealing with. But the online orientation is basically a way for us to transfer critical information that may have gotten lost in the recruiting process. So for instance, making clear, because this became an issue last year, that they know they have residencies, and part of the residencies is that they have to be here all day. It's not something that they can sort of fit into their schedule. Making sure that they have gone through the students have gone through the eCampus site, and that they understand how to use Blackboard, how to use the LMS that they're trying to use. Introducing them to the professors who they will have for that semester, so that they can have just a little taste of what they are going to be learning as the course goes on. So that's how we're using the orientation.
Is there a thought about bringing those students really into that on-campus community?
So we have. So again, so this is actually it's one of my points. Residency versus non-residency, right? Because there's a move right now to make all LLM programs completely online. And part of the reason why I've always resisted that is because I think it's really important that the students meet each other and they get to know each other and they develop it. Apparently, according to all the online education researchers, that diminishes student recruitment, and my answer is I don't care, right? Like it is an important enough value to me that I've sort of insisted that we keep it. And so my way of sort of compromising is to make it shorter period of time. But we do. So we have the online orientation, which originally used to be in the summer. The reason why we've changed it now is to the fall is because we've had some students who just finished taking their JD and they're studying for the bar. And so if we had in the summer, interfered. And then we tied our residency to some of our courses. And because we tied it to some of our courses, it needs to be at a specific time in the fall, right? Like, so the crime scene investigation happens at a particular point in that curriculum for the course. But if you don't have that, if it's not tied to a specific course, which most residencies that I'm aware of are tied to a specific course, then you can have it at any time. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I did. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, do you have any students who, you were saying before you tried to sell this program for access to education to a broader market?
Right.
Do you have students that will fly in for this thing?
So we do. So we have, again, we have a very small pool that we're working with right now. Most of our students in this are from West Virginia, but we've had a couple who are out of state, and they come in for the original residency. One of the challenges actually was, and it relates to Marjorie's class, is this one student in particular, she's from North Carolina, she was supposed to come in for a residency, which was basically going to be a mock hearing of expert witnesses, and then I think she got caught up in hurricanes or floods or something, and so she's like, I can't come. Sorry. And that was an issue for us. Like, how do we deal with it? And basically what we ended up doing was using video conferencing so that she could Skype in or the equivalent of it and do it that way. Wasn't ideal, wasn't what we wanted, but it ended up working out.
Great. I did want to mention for my school in terms of online orientation, we hold orientation for students 3 times a year, corresponding with our 3 starts into the Juris Doctor program. It's the same style as class. We invite people that they can fly and come on site and attend on site from the classroom, but it is also available live and streaming. We use the same systems as what we use for classes, and so it is an orientation onto the system literally as they are there. We do the tech portion first,